Hello everyone, we're back. This is world history and we're talking about Cold War and decolonization, specifically decolonization. Today we're getting into decolonization that happened in the Middle East. So let's get going. These are the vocabulary words that's associated with this particular section of this unit. Feel free to make sure you jot those down. If you're in my class, you definitely have to make sure you have these two words in your data decode notes. All right, so let's talk about the Palestinian Mandate. So in the years between the two world wars, World War I and World War II, many European Jews migrated to the Palestinian Mandate, which is what you see right here. Okay, that area is known as the Middle East. Okay, it is considered a historic homeland and a religious center, not only for Judaism, but also for Islam. Okay. Many Palestinian Arabs lived in that area, which was called the Palestinian Mandate or Palestine. However, as many Arabs immigrated to that area as well, and Jews were also immigrating, tensions between Jews and Arabs increased and intensified in the 30s. And that led to revolts that was happening in that area. Eventually, those tensions between the Arabs and Jews in that area was called Arab-Israeli Wars. The Zionist movement was the belief or the practice of having a unified nation or country of Jews. As you see here, they wanted land of ancient Israel to be a home or a country for all Jewish people, and they strive to build those institutions that was necessary for them to create a country, right? However, at the end of World War II, many of the world was shocked. Many people were shocked at what was happening towards Jews with the Holocaust, right? Because of that, a lot of sympathy came in for Jewish people, right? And in 1947, as you see here, the UN General Assembly issued a resolution to call for the Palestinian Mandate to be divided into a Jewish state and an Arabic state. So it was supposed to be divided, as you see here in this map. However, in 1948, the then first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, announced the establishment of a country called Israel, and it was recognized by most developed or superpowers like United States, the UN, etc. Arabs that lived in this area of Palestine saw this as a betrayal towards Palestinian Arabs. Many of the Arab countries surrounding this area saw this as a betrayal of Palestinian Arabs, and they did not recognize Israel as a country or a Jewish state. So these 5 Arab countries began to invade Israel. As you see here, the invasion failed, but there was continued conflict in this area, and because of that, thousands of Palestinians had to flee to neighboring countries, as you see here along this area: Syria, Jordan, especially in the West Bank here, and the Gaza Strip, which was controlled by Egypt. So let's talk a little bit about Egypt and what was happening with them. Gamal Abdel Nasser able to take control of the Egyptian government away from Great Britain in the early 1950s, and that happened when, in a series of wars, especially because of the Suez Canal. Remember back when we talked about imperialism, that the Suez Canal was controlled by Great Britain. It's an important waterway linked to connect most of Europe to Asia. So knowing that that was the case, Great Britain did not want to let go of it. So Great Britain decided to strike back against Egypt, and then Israel also joined the fight, right, with Great Britain and France, trying to keep this area of the Suez Canal. So now these 3 nations are attacking Egypt, as you see here, starting this Suez War in 1956. However, the Soviet Union, surprisingly, right before, before all of the tension of the Cold War happened, and the United States, they joined in with supporting Nasser because they opposed having the French and British influence in the Middle East, but more importantly on the Suez Canal. So because with this support of Egypt, they were able to force Britain, France, and Israel to come out of Egypt, and now Nasser and the Egyptian government are able to control that area of the Suez Canal. Nasser also began to promote Pan-Arabism, or Arabism, and that is the unification of people of Arabic descent, regardless of whatever boundary that they're in. He just wanted to have all Arabic states or countries and people unified. So as you see here in 1958, Egypt unified with Syria to form the United Arab Republic. And he was the first president of this new country per se. However, the UAR, or the United Arab Republic, fell through because of a Syrian military leadership that took over, and they withdrew their country from the UAR. The 6-Day War was a war that happened between 1956 and 57, when tensions grew dramatically between the Arab states and Israel. In the 6-Day War, the Israeli army came in and defeated the Arab forces, and then was able to take control not only of the Golan Heights, but also the West Bank and all of this area, which is known as the Sinai Peninsula. Because of that tripled the amount of territory that Israel would now have. And many of the Arab states, or the Arab countries surrounding this area, demanded that Israel give back or return the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula back to their constituents, right? Sinai going back to Egypt, and of course the West Bank and Gaza Strip back to Palestine, or Palestinians. To squash all of this beef, to say it that way, President Carter, who was Jimmy Carter, in the United States, met with the then president of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, and Prime Minister Menachem, Begin. And the result of this negotiation was called the Camp David Accords, and they came to an agreement to sign an Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. In this treaty, it led to a complete withdrawal of Israel's troops from the Sinai Peninsula, and to end the war between Egypt and Israel. And also the Gaza Strip and the West Bank was supposed to be returned to the Palestinians as well. However, many of those still Arab countries did not, or outright refused to recognize Israel as a full independent country. In Iran, many Muslims saw Western society and the new Iranian society, and they didn't like it because in their eyes they saw Western systems, or capitalism in that sense, to be based on greed and materialism and having an American influence. In opposition to the then Shah, Ruhollah Khomeini was able to gain power, and he became the Ayatollah Khomeini. And from there, once the Shah's government was completely collapsed in 1979, the Ayatollah Khomeini was able to replace that government with an Islamic Republic and set up a theocracy, which is based on religion. So he restored, or brought back, the new government that he established to a Islamic law-based republic. There was tension between the United States and Iran because of these anti-American feeling that stirred up in Iran, and that erupted when militants in Iran seized Americans in a hostage situation in the embassy in Tehran, and that lasted for more than a year. But eventually, after the Khomeini's death in 1989, a more moderate government came in with more civil liberties, more democratic means of government. Let's talk about the Persian Gulf War. In 1990, Saddam Hussein sent troops across the border, right? So this is Kuwait right here. So he sent his troops across the border to seize Kuwait. This is Kuwait right here, which was an oil-rich country along the Persian Gulf. Okay, this is Iraq. This is Kuwait. So he's now sending in all of his troops into Kuwait. This led to a Gulf War. So the United States then sent or led international forces. They then sent in troops to help free Kuwait from Saddam Hussein and Iraq. And that was called the Persian Gulf War. What they were hoping is that there would be an internal revolt to overthrow Saddam Hussein. And then these allies, as you see here, Great Britain, France, they would impose really harsh economic sanctions on Iraq for invading Kuwait. But that overthrow of Saddam Hussein did not happen at all. And eventually the war ended. They were not able to capture Saddam Hussein, but they were able to gain free Kuwait from that invasion of Iraq. So after World War II, the king of Afghanistan was in search of economic assistance for his country. And of course, they developed really close ties with the Soviet Union because Afghanistan is very close to the Soviet Union in this case. This is Iran right here. This is Afghanistan, pretty close. And then this is Pakistan. Remember, we talked about Pakistan and India not too long ago. There was a lot of fighting that was happening in Afghanistan. However, there was a full-scale invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 by the Soviet Union, and they occupied Afghanistan for 10 years. This was also considered a proxy war during the Cold War situation. So now, of course, if this is a proxy war, remember we talked about that when we talked about the Cold War, who is going to step up in here? Because now, if the Soviet Union is occupying Afghanistan, they're going to make it communist. Who's going to step in? Of course, the United States. So now they send in their troops along, supported by Pakistan, to handle the situation in Afghanistan. Now, when the Soviets left Afghanistan, now Islamic groups within Afghanistan are now trying to fight for control to make their country an independent country away from the Soviets, away from the United States, what have you. So now the invasion of Afghanistan will be that marker for the collapse of the Soviet Union as a communist nation. As you see here, the Taliban was able to seize the city of Kabul in 1996. And the Taliban was able to control a lot of the country. The Taliban was backed by conservative religious forces in Pakistan. And the Taliban was provided a base of operations in Pakistan by this guy right here, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden came from a wealthy family in Saudi Arabia, and he used his wealth to support the Afghan resistance. Remember, we were just talking about that the internal Islamic people of Afghan, right? Or the Afghan people that were resisting and trying to forge their own control of the country. So in 1998, Osama bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda and recruited Muslims to drive out Westerners being United States, French, British, what have you, any Westerners out of Afghanistan. After the Taliban was able to seize control of much of Afghanistan, then Osama bin Laden used a lot of his bases there to train Al-Qaeda recruits and so on and so forth with bin Laden and the Taliban, and that is going to become a bigger issue much later on, right? So that ends our section here for the Middle East, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace.